The road vanishes into the fog when she's pushed. No scream, no brakes, no witnesses. Fallen into the abyss, she screams until the pain becomes her voice. And someone, up above, listens. The sound of rescue isn't a siren. It's the engine of someone who heard and chose not to leave. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. The morning arrived slowly in the small Catskills town, the way it always did on winter Tuesdays, when the fog rolled down from the mountaintops and covered the streets like a thick veil. Sarah woke up with the same feeling as always, the weight of a body that was no longer just hers, the baby stirring inside, the enormous belly that made her feel heavy and light at the same time. 7 months pregnant. So little time left. So much to go. She opened her eyes slowly and found the white ceiling of the bedroom, the same as always. Beside her, the bed was empty. Ethan had already left. It wasn't unusual. For the last few months he'd been waking up earlier, leaving earlier, coming home later. He said work was demanding, that he needed to ensure their stability for when the baby arrived. Sarah wanted to believe him. She tried to believe him. But there was something in his eyes that had changed, something she couldn't name, but she could feel. It was as if Ethan were only present in body, his mind wandering somewhere else, distant, inaccessible. When she tried to talk, he'd change the subject. When she touched him, he'd gently pull away, but he'd still pull away. And Sarah, pregnant and vulnerable, felt increasingly alone within her own marriage. She got up, carefully leaning on the headboard. Her legs were swollen, as they had been for weeks. Her doctor said it was normal, that the baby's pressure was compressing her blood vessels and causing fluid retention, but it was uncomfortable. It was exhausting. It was one more thing that made her feel trapped inside her own body. Sarah walked to the window and looked outside. The house was on a quiet, tree-lined street, far from the town centre. Ethan had insisted on the move a few months earlier. He'd said they needed more space, a quieter place to raise their child. But Sarah felt the move had another motive. It was as if he wanted to distance her from everything familiar, from her friends, from her routine, and she, tired of fighting, had agreed. Now, looking at the empty street, Sarah felt a pang of loneliness. She didn't know the neighbors. She had no friends nearby. Her parents lived in New York City, too far for frequent visits, and Ethan, who was supposed to be her safe harbor, seemed more distant every day. She sighed and walked to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was fuller, her eyes puffy from restless nights, but it was the same face as always. Sarah Miller, 32 years old, married for 3, pregnant with her first child, a life that looked perfect from the outside, but on the inside was shattering into small, silent pieces. The phone rang in the living room. Sarah walked slowly toward it, steadying herself on the furniture. When she answered, she recognized the voice immediately. Eleanor, Ethan's mother, the woman who had never fully accepted her, who had always treated her with a cold, calculated courtesy. From the beginning of their relationship, Sarah had felt that Eleanor saw her as someone who wasn't good enough for her son. Ethan was a successful doctor from a traditional family in the region. Sarah was an elementary school teacher from a simple family in New York City. To Eleanor, that was a gap that could never be bridged. "Good morning, Sarah. Are you home?" The voice was polite but impersonal. "I am. Ethan left early." "I know. I need to talk to you. I'll be there in an hour." It wasn't a request. It was an order disguised as politeness. Sarah felt her chest tighten, but she agreed. What else could she do? While she waited, Sarah tried to tidy up the house, but the fatigue was overwhelming. She ended up sitting on the sofa, her hands on her belly, feeling the baby's movements. It was a boy. They had already chosen a name, Gabriel. Ethan seemed happy with the idea of having a son. Sarah just wanted the baby to be healthy, to come into the world safely. But there was a fear she couldn't shake, a fear that grew each day, fed by Ethan's silences, by Eleanor's glances, by the feeling that something was wrong, very wrong, and she was the only one who didn't know what it was. When the doorbell rang, Sarah got up slowly and went to the door. Eleanor entered with her usual posture, upright, elegant, impeccable. She wore a grey wool coat, her hair in a perfect bun, her makeup subtle. She looked like a CEO, not a mother-in-law visiting her pregnant daughter-in-law. "How are you?" "Fine, thank you. And you?" "Busy as always, but I came because we need to talk." Sarah gestured to the sofa, and Eleanor sat down carefully, crossing her legs. There was something in her posture that made Sarah tense. It wasn't just the usual coldness, it was something more, something deliberate. "Sarah, I'll be direct. I know you're pregnant. I know you're expecting my son's child. But I need you to understand something. This child cannot be born." The words fell like stones into the silence of the room. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. "What?" Eleanor sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Ethan is going through a difficult time. He's not ready to be a father. And frankly, Sarah, neither are you. This marriage was a mistake from the start. You two have nothing in common. And now with a child in the mix, everything will become even more complicated." Sarah felt anger rise in her throat, but she tried to stay calm. "This child is mine. It's ours. Ethan and I decided to have this baby together." Ethan was confused. He made a rash choice, but there's still time to fix this. "Time to fix it? The baby is due in 2 months. Eleanor stared at her with those cold, emotionless eyes. "There are ways to handle this, discreetly, without a fuss. I know doctors who can help." Sarah's stomach churned. She instinctively placed a hand on her belly, as if protecting Gabriel from something invisible and threatening. "Are you asking me to get rid of my son?" "I'm asking you to be rational. You're young. You can have other children in the future, with someone more suitable. But this child right now will ruin Ethan's life and yours too. Get out of my house." Sarah's voice trembled, but it was firm. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Don't be foolish, Sarah. Get out, now." Eleanor stood up slowly, picked up her purse and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned. "You'll regret this decision." And she left, leaving Sarah alone, trembling, her hands still on her belly. That night, when Ethan came home, Sarah tried to tell him what had happened, but he seemed exhausted, distracted. He said his mother was just worried, that she always overreacted, that Sarah shouldn't pay her any mind. And then he went to the bedroom, leaving her alone in the living room, heartbroken and feeling like she was losing everything. The following days were a blur. Ethan left early, came home late. Eleanor didn't call again, but Sarah felt her presence like a shadow, always lurking. And the fear grew. The fear that something terrible was coming, something she couldn't predict, but that she felt in her bones, in her soul, in the racing of her heart, every time she heard a strange noise or saw Ethan on the phone, whispering words she couldn't understand. A week after Eleanor's visit, Sarah started having back pain. It was intense, waking her up in the middle of the night. The doctor said it was normal, that her posture was changing with the weight of her belly, that she should do physical therapy. But the pain only got worse, and then one morning Sarah woke up and couldn't feel her legs. The panic was immediate. She screamed for Ethan, but he had already left. She managed to grab the phone and call 911. The ambulance arrived quickly and took her to the hospital. They ran tests, and the diagnosis came like a punch to the gut, an acute herniated disc compressing her nerves. It was serious. She needed absolute bed rest, maybe even surgery after the birth. In the meantime, she would have to use a wheelchair. Sarah cried when she heard the news. She cried for the pain, for the helplessness, for the feeling that her body was failing her just when she needed it most. Ethan arrived at the hospital a few hours later, pale, worried, or so it seemed. Sarah wasn't sure of anything anymore. He took her home in a new wheelchair, bought in a hurry. He said he would take care of her, that everything would be okay. But in his eyes, Sarah saw something that made her tremble. It wasn't love. It wasn't concern. It was something darker, something she didn't want to name. That night, Sarah woke up thirsty and wheeled herself to the kitchen. The house was silent. She passed the living room and saw a light on in Ethan's office. The door was ajar, and then she heard voices. Ethan was on the phone, and he was talking to Eleanor. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. She's in a wheelchair, she's vulnerable. That's precisely why it's the perfect opportunity. No one will suspect a thing." Sarah's heart stopped. She held her breath, trying to hear more. "What if someone finds out?" "No one will find out. You just need to do what I said. Take her to the mountain road. It's isolated, foggy. It'll look like an accident. The wheelchair slipped. She fell. Simple. Mom, this is insane." "What's insane is letting this woman ruin your life. You have a brilliant future ahead of you, Ethan. You can't throw it all away for a child you never even wanted. Do what needs to be done. Tomorrow I'll go with you to make sure everything goes according to plan." Silence. Sarah was shaking so hard the wheelchair almost moved. She backed away slowly, returned to the bedroom and closed the door quietly. And then, lying in bed in the dark, she felt the baby move inside her. They wanted to kill her. Ethan and Eleanor, the man she loved, and the woman who was supposed to be her family. They wanted to kill her. They wanted to kill Gabriel. Sarah lay awake all night, trembling, thinking. She had to escape. But how? She couldn't walk. She didn't have a car. She had nowhere to go. If she tried to call for help, Ethan might move up the plan. If she told someone, who would believe her? Ethan was a respected, well-liked doctor. She was just an out-of-town teacher, pregnant and in a wheelchair. When dawn broke, Ethan entered the room with a forced smile. "Sarah, I thought we could go for a drive today. You've been so cooped up in the house. A little fresh air will do you good." Sarah's blood ran cold, but she forced a smile. "Where to?" "There's a beautiful road up in the mountains, quiet with a view of the valley. It'll be relaxing." She wanted to scream, to beg, to run. But she couldn't do any of that. So she nodded, her heart pounding. "Okay." Ethan helped her get dressed, put her in the wheelchair, and took her to the car. The chair went into the trunk. Sarah sat in the back seat, her hands trembling. Ethan drove in silence, and then, when they were on the road, he pulled into a gas station. "Just getting some gas. I'll be right back." He got out, and Sarah saw in the rearview mirror a figure approaching. Eleanor. She got into the driver's side of the car without a word. Ethan came back, saw his mother, and showed no surprise. And the car continued on up the mountain into the fog, getting farther and farther from town, farther and farther from life. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed. She prayed for Gabriel, for herself, for a miracle. And when the car stopped, in the middle of a narrow road with no guardrail, with no one around, she opened her eyes and saw Ethan taking the wheelchair out of the trunk. "Let's go for a walk, Sarah. You'll love the view." He put her in the chair and pushed her to the edge of the road. The fog was so thick, Sarah could barely see a few feet in front of her. But she knew that right below there was a cliff. She could feel the emptiness in the air, in the lack of sound, in the absence of life. Ethan stopped the chair. Eleanor got out of the car and stood there watching. No emotion, no remorse. Sarah felt tears stream down her face. "Ethan, please, don't do this. I love you. Gabriel is your son." He didn't answer. He just stood there behind her, his hands on the wheelchair's handles. And Sarah, in a calm voice, because there was nothing left to do, asked, "So are you going to turn around?" Silence. And then, without warning, she felt the push, firm, controlled. The chair lurched forward, the front wheels lifted, and Sarah fell. The world became a blur of sky and rock and pain. The chair hit, spun, shattered. Sarah was thrown from it, her body tumbling through the air, and then she felt the impact. The pain was so intense she almost passed out, but she didn't. She lay there, caught on a narrow ledge, feeling the blood run, feeling the legs that wouldn't respond, feeling Gabriel moving inside her, scared, desperate. Above she heard the sound of an engine. The car. Leaving. Driving away. Leaving her there to die. Sarah closed her eyes and with everything she had she screamed. She screamed like she had never screamed before. She screamed for her life, for Gabriel's life, for justice, for hope. She screamed until her throat was raw, until her lungs ached, until she had no voice left. And then, in the silence that followed, she heard something, a different sound, An engine, rougher, more alive, a motorcycle, and Sarah, even with no strength left, screamed again. Because maybe, just maybe, someone was listening. Leo Martinez had been on the road for 3 hours when he decided to pull over. It wasn't fatigue, though the trip from Kingston through the Catskills was long and winding. It was something more subtle, an unease he couldn't name. He worked as an independent courier, delivering packages throughout the mountain region, and he knew every curve of that road like the back of his hand. But that afternoon, something was different. The fog was thicker than usual, the silence heavier. And then, as he rounded a particularly narrow bend, he heard something that made him slam on his brakes. A scream. It wasn't loud, it wasn't close, but it was a human scream, unmistakable, cutting through the mountain silence like a blade. Leo stopped his bike, killed the engine, and listened. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just the wind, the fog, the emptiness. And then, again, another scream, weaker, more desperate. Leo didn't think twice. He took off his helmet, grabbed the flashlight he always kept in his backpack, and started walking along the road, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. The fog made everything difficult. He called out, but there was no answer. He kept walking, his heart racing, until he saw something that made him stop. A skid mark. No, not a skid mark. Wheel tracks. Narrow tracks, like from a wheelchair. And they ended abruptly at the edge of the road, where there was no guardrail. Leo approached slowly and looked down. At first he saw nothing but rocks and vegetation, but then he switched on his flashlight and swept it across the slope. And that's when he saw it. A mangled wheelchair wedged between the rocks, about 30 feet down. And further below, on a narrow ledge, a woman. She was face down, motionless, covered in blood. "Oh my God!" Leo yelled. "Hey, can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing, and then a faint movement. The woman turned her head, her eyes meeting his, and Leo felt his chest tighten. She was alive, but for how long? He ran back to his bike, grabbed the rope he always carried for tying down packages. It wasn't climbing gear, but it was what he had. He tied one end to a sturdy tree on the roadside, tested its hold, and started to rappel down. The descent was difficult. The rocks were loose. The fog obscured his vision, and Leo was no climber. But he was strong, used to physical labor, and he was determined. He went down slowly, testing each foothold, controlling his breath. When he finally reached the woman, what he saw made him swallow hard. She was seriously injured. There was blood on several parts of her body. Her left leg was visibly broken, and her face was pale, her lips purple. But the worst part was her stomach. She was pregnant, very pregnant. "Hey, easy now. I'm here. You're safe now." Sarah opened her eyes with effort. She saw the man kneeling beside her, the flashlight, illuminating a tan face, dark, attentive eyes, black hair messy from the descent. He took off his leather jacket and carefully covered her with it. "You did the right thing, screaming. I heard you." His voice was calm, steady. Sarah tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "My baby." Leo looked at her belly and felt panic rise. He wasn't a doctor. He knew nothing about pregnancy, but he knew enough to understand that this woman and her child were in grave danger. "I'm going to call for help, but I need you to stay with me. Okay, breathe slowly. Try not to move." He took out his phone, but there was no signal. The fog and the altitude blocked everything. He would have to climb back up, get to a higher point, make the call. But he couldn't leave her alone. Not in this state. Leo made a quick decision. He tore his own shirt into makeshift strips. He carefully splinted Sarah's broken leg, tying the strips firmly, but not too tight. He checked her pulse, counted her breaths. She was weak, but stable. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah, I'm Leo. I'm going to climb up, quickly to get help. But I'll be back, okay? I'm not leaving you here alone." Sarah squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "It wasn't an accident." Leo paused, looking at her. "What do you mean?" "They pushed me, my husband, and his mother. They wanted to kill me. They wanted to kill my son." Her voice was weak, but the words were clear. Leo felt a chill run down his spine. He looked up at the road, and suddenly it all made sense. The wheel tracks stopping right at the edge, the lack of brake marks, the wheelchair on the cliffside. This hadn't been an accident. It had been an attempted murder. Did they run? Yes. They left me here. Leo took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He had to go up, call for help. But first he looked into Sarah's eyes. I believe you. And I'm going to make sure you get out of here alive. You and your baby. I promise. He climbed the slope faster than he had come down, fueled by adrenaline and urgency. When he reached the road, he ran to a higher point where he finally got a signal. He called 911, explained the situation, gave them the coordinates. They said they would dispatch a rescue team immediately, but it would take at least 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Leo climbed back down to Sarah. She was conscious, but shivering from the cold. He sat beside her, keeping her warm with his own body. Help is on the way. It'll be a little while, but they're coming. Sarah closed her eyes. The contractions had started. They weren't strong yet, but they were regular. The baby was reacting to the trauma, the stress. She knew that if she went into labor there under these conditions, Gabriel wouldn't stand a chance. Leo noticed the change in her breathing. Are you in pain? Contractions, the baby. Leo felt the panic return, but he forced himself to stay calm. He remembered something his sister had told him when she was pregnant. Breathing. It was all about breathing. Sarah, look at me. We're going to breathe together, okay? Breathe in slow, like this, and out, slowly. That's it. Again. They stayed there, breathing together, counting the seconds, fighting the panic and the pain. And gradually the contractions began to space out. They didn't stop completely, but they became less intense. You're doing great, really great. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at Leo. She didn't know this man. She knew nothing about him, but in that moment, he was all she had. He was the difference between life and death. Why did you stop? Why did you listen? Leo was silent for a moment. Because the sound didn't feel wrong. It felt like a plea. They stayed there, in the silence of the mountain, until they heard the distant sound of sirens. The rescue team had arrived. The team rappelled down with proper equipment, a rigid backboard, a first aid kit. They carefully immobilized Sarah, monitoring her and the baby's vital signs. Leo climbed up with them, holding Sarah's hand the entire time. When they finally reached the road, Sarah was placed in the ambulance. Leo was about to step away, but she held onto his hand. Come with me, please. He looked at the paramedics, who nodded. He got into the ambulance and stayed there, by her side, as they drove down the mountain toward the hospital. On the way, Sarah told him everything. The marriage to Ethan, the pregnancy, the changes in his behavior, Eleanor's visit, the conversation she'd overheard, the plan to kill her. The paramedics listened in silence, exchanging worried glances. When they arrived at the hospital, they immediately called the police. Sarah was taken straight to the emergency room. The doctors did a full assessment. The fractures were serious but treatable. The baby was in distress but alive. They decided to admit her for observation, on absolute bed rest. If the contractions returned, they would have to perform an emergency C-section. Leo stayed in the waiting room, not sure what to do. He had done his part. He had saved Sarah. He could leave, go back to his life, forget all of this. But he couldn't. He stayed there, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, waiting for news. 2 hours later, a nurse came to him. She's stable. She asked for you. Leo went to the room. Sarah was in bed, pale, with several tubes connected to her body. But when she saw Leo, she managed a weak smile. Thank you. For everything. You're welcome. They were silent for a moment. Then Sarah said, The police will want to talk to you, to confirm what happened. I know, and I'll tell them everything I saw. Just then, the door opened and 2 police officers walked in, a middle-aged woman with short hair and a serious expression, and a young man with a notepad. Good evening. I'm Detective Brenda Davis. This is Officer Matt Rogers. We need to take your statements. Sarah told her story again, every detail. The conversation she'd overheard between Ethan and Eleanor, the forced drive, the road, the push. The detective took notes, not interrupting. When it was Leo's turn, he described what he had found. The tracks on the road, the shattered wheelchair, Sarah's position on the slope. The detective asked him to take a team to the site as soon as possible so they could collect evidence. "We're going to locate your husband and his mother. Where do they live?" Sarah gave them the address. The detective nodded. "We'll bring them in tonight, before they can run." But when the team arrived at Ethan's house, they found it empty. Ethan and Eleanor were gone. They had taken clothes, documents, money. They were on the run. The detective issued an arrest warrant and sent out an alert to all precincts in the region. They couldn't have gotten far, not in such a short time. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sarah was moved to a more comfortable room. The contractions had stopped completely. The baby was stable. The doctors said that with luck, she might be able to carry the pregnancy to term without further complications. Leo visited her every day. He didn't stay long, just a few minutes to see how she was doing. He brought fruit, magazines, little things to distract her. They didn't talk much, but his presence was comforting. On the third day, the detective returned with news. "We found their car. It was abandoned on a back road, near the state line with Pennsylvania, but no one was inside. We believe they took a bus or hitched a ride. We're checking security cameras at the bus stations." Sarah felt the fear return. As long as Ethan and Eleanor were free, she wasn't safe. They could try again. They could find her. The detective saw the fear in her eyes. "We're posting an officer at your door. 24 hours a day. No one is getting near you." And they did. A uniformed armed police officer stood guard outside Sarah's room day and night. It was reassuring but also terrifying, because it meant the danger was real. 5 days after the fall, the detective came back with better news. "We arrested Eleanor. She was at a hotel in Scranton, registered under a fake name, but the manager thought her behavior was suspicious and called the police. When we got there, she tried to escape through the window. She didn't make it. And Ethan? Not yet, but we'll find him. It's a matter of time." Eleanor was brought back to the Catskills. She was interrogated for hours. At first, she denied everything. Said she didn't know what they were talking about, that Sarah was making up stories, that the fall had been an accident. But when confronted with the evidence, she began to falter. The wheel tracks on the road, the lack of any 911 calls, the search history on her phone for falls and criminal liability. Everything pointed to premeditation. And then, when they showed her the text messages exchanged with Ethan, planning everything, she broke down. She cried. She screamed. She said it was all Ethan's fault, that she just wanted to protect her son, that she never imagined he would actually go through with it. But when they asked if she had tried to stop him, she fell silent. Because she hadn't. She had been there on the road, watching. She had seen the push, and she had told Ethan to drive away, without looking back. Eleanor was held without bail, charged with attempted murder. And when they learned Sarah was pregnant, the charges were expanded to include the unborn child. Ethan remained a fugitive for another week, but the pressure was mounting. His photo was in every newspaper, at every police station. There was no way to run forever. And then one morning he showed up. He wasn't arrested. He turned himself in. He walked into the police station alone, thin, bearded, with dark circles under his eyes. He said he couldn't take it anymore, that he couldn't sleep, that he saw Sarah's face every time he closed his eyes. The detective interrogated him personally, and Ethan confessed everything. He said he had never wanted a child, that Eleanor had pressured him to get rid of Sarah and the baby, that he had tried to resist, but his mother was convincing, manipulative. She said Sarah would ruin his life, that he deserved better, that he had a brilliant future ahead of him. And then when Sarah was confined to the wheelchair, Eleanor saw the perfect opportunity. Ethan cried during the interrogation. He said he was sorry, that he didn't know what had been going through his head, that he loved Sarah, that he wanted the child, but that he had been too weak to stand up to his mother. The detective listened in silence, and when he finished, she said only one thing. You weren't weak. You were a coward, and you're going to pay for it. Ethan was arrested, charged with attempted murder just like Eleanor. They would both remain in custody until the trial. When Sarah found out, she felt immense relief, but she also felt sadness, because a part of her still loved Ethan, loved the man he had been before all of this, before Eleanor planted the poison in his mind. But it didn't matter anymore. Now Sarah needed to focus on Gabriel, on surviving, on recovering, and Leo was there, every day, helping her believe that it was possible. The days in the hospital dragged on like water over ancient stones. Sarah spent hours looking out the window, watching life happen outside, while she was trapped in that room with tubes connected to her body and fear still pulsing in her veins. The fractures were healing well, according to the doctors. The baby was stable. But the pain Sarah felt wasn't just physical. It was a deep, persistent ache in her soul for which there was no medicine. How had she been so blind? How had she not seen what Ethan was capable of? Or worse, how had she not realized Eleanor had so much power over her son that she could convince him to commit such a horrific act? She asked herself these questions every day, and every night when she tried to sleep she saw the scene again, the road, the fog, the push, the fall, and she would wake up sweating, her heart racing, feeling Gabriel stir inside her as if he were scared too. Leo always showed up in the late afternoon. He never stayed long, half an hour, sometimes less. He always brought something, a book, some fruit, a magazine. He would sit in the chair next to her bed and they would talk. Or rather, he would let her talk and he would listen attentively without judgment, without interruption. Sarah learned that Leo was 35, lived alone in Kingston, and had been a courier since he was 18. He had never married, never had children. His life was simple: wake up, work, come home, sleep, repeat. But there was something different about Leo, a solidity, a calming presence. "Why do you keep coming here?" Sarah asked one day. Leo was silent for a moment, fidgeting with his hands. "I don't know. I guess because you reminded me of someone." "Who?" "My sister. She went through something similar, not the same, but similar. A husband who was no good. Who hit her? Who made her feel worthless? I wasn't there for her when she needed me most, and I regret that every day." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "Is she okay now?" "She is. She managed to get out of that relationship, rebuilt her life. But it took time, and she had to do it all alone. I didn't help, so I guess, in a way, being here is my way of making up for it, of doing what I didn't do for her." Sarah reached out and touched his hand. "You saved me, Leo. You saved me and Gabriel. I don't know how I'll ever thank you. You don't have to thank me, you just have to get well." That night after Leo left, Sarah kept thinking. She was starting to feel something for him. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something, a connection, a gratitude that went beyond words. And also fear. Fear of getting attached to someone again, of trusting again, of being disappointed again. Meanwhile, the legal case against Ethan and Eleanor moved forward. Detective Davis came to the hospital regularly to update Sarah on its progress. The evidence was solid. Cell phone records showed that Eleanor had searched for accidents on mountain roads days before. The text messages between her and Ethan planning everything. Leo's testimony confirming the crime scene. Ethan's defense tried to argue that he was under emotional duress from his mother, that he suffered from dependent personality disorder. But the prosecutor countered that Ethan was a grown man, a doctor, fully capable of distinguishing right from wrong. And he had chosen wrong. Eleanor, for her part, tried to plead temporary insanity. She claimed she was protecting her son from a destructive relationship. But when confronted with the fact that she had planned everything in advance, researched it, organized it, the plea fell apart. Both remained in jail. The trial was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, Sarah started physical therapy. At first it was painful. Her muscles had atrophied, the nerves still recovering from the compression. But slowly, with the help of the physical therapists, she began to feel her legs again. First, a tingling. then sensation, and finally, movement. The day she took her first steps with the help of a walker, Sarah cried. She cried with relief, with joy, with gratitude. Leo was there as always, and when she looked at him, she saw tears in his eyes too. "You did it. I did it." 2 weeks later, Sarah was discharged from the hospital, but she had nowhere to go. The house she had shared with Ethan was part of the investigation, and even if it weren't, she would never go back there. That place was tainted with bad memories, with lies, with betrayal. It was Leo who offered a solution. "I have a small apartment in Kingston. It's simple, but there's a spare room. You can stay there until you get on. Your feet, no strings attached, just until you figure out what you want to do." Sarah hesitated. It was a lot to accept from a stranger. But Leo wasn't a stranger anymore, not after everything they had been through together. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." And so Sarah went to live with Leo. The apartment was indeed simple. 2 small bedrooms, a living room with an open kitchen, 1 bathroom, but it was clean, organized, and had a beautiful view of the mountains. Leo gave her the larger room, insisted she take the better bed. He would sleep on the sofa bed in the living room. For the first few days, Sarah stayed in her room most of the time. She was embarrassed, awkward about invading Leo's life like this, but he made her feel welcome. He made breakfast, always left fresh fruit in the kitchen, asked if she needed anything. Gradually, Sarah began to open up. She would leave her room, talk with Leo, help in the kitchen, and she discovered more about him. She learned that he loved old soul music, that he collected vinyl records, that he had a special talent for fixing broken things. He was a man of few words but many actions. One evening, as they were having dinner together, Sarah asked, "Why did you never get married?" Leo was quiet, cutting a piece of chicken. "Never found the right person, or maybe I never looked hard enough. I was always so focused on work, on making money, on being stable, and by the time I looked up, time had passed." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. But I think things happen when they're supposed to happen. You can't force it." Sarah nodded. She understood perfectly. The weeks went by and Sarah's belly grew. Gabriel was more and more active, kicking, moving. The doctors said everything was fine, that the baby had weathered the trauma surprisingly well. Sarah went to her routine checkups, monitored his development, prepared for the birth. And Leo was always there. He went with her to appointments, helped carry groceries, assembled the crib Sarah had bought. It wasn't his responsibility, but he did it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. One night, Sarah woke up in pain. It wasn't a contraction, it was different, a sharp pain in her back radiating down her legs. She tried to stand up, but her legs gave out. She screamed. Leo was there in seconds. He saw Sarah on the floor, clutching her belly. "What happened?" "My legs. They're not working." The panic returned. Leo helped her back into bed, called an ambulance. They went to the hospital, and there the doctors ran tests. The herniated disc was pressing on her nerves again. The baby's weight was making it worse. They would have to do the C-section earlier than planned. Gabriel was born at 36 weeks, small but healthy. He cried loudly when he came out, his lungs working. Perfectly. Sarah cried too, but with relief. She had done it. Gabriel was alive. He was safe. Leo was in the waiting room when the nurse brought the baby out. He looked at the tiny little being wrapped in a blue swaddle and felt something he had never felt before. An absolute tenderness, a desire to protect. When Sarah woke up from the anesthesia, the first thing she saw was Leo, holding Gabriel carefully, as if he were the most precious thing in the world. "He's perfect," Leo said. Sarah smiled, weak but happy. "Yes, he is." Gabriel stayed in. Observation for 2 days, but was soon discharged. So was Sarah. And when they returned to Leo's apartment, something had changed. It was no longer a temporary shelter. It was a home. Leo helped with everything. He changed diapers, prepared bottles, woke up in the middle of the night when Gabriel cried. Sarah was amazed. Many men who were actual fathers didn't do half of what Leo did. And he wasn't even the father, but he acted like he was. A month after Gabriel's birth, the trial of Ethan and Eleanor began. Sarah had to testify. It was difficult. Seeing Ethan sitting at the defendant's table, pale, thin, handcuffed. Seeing Eleanor beside him with that cold, calculating expression, showing no remorse. Sarah told the court everything, every detail. The conversation she'd overheard, the forced drive, the push, the fall. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She needed everyone to know the truth. Ethan's defense tried to discredit her. They said she was traumatized, that her memory might be confused, that maybe it really had been an accident. But when the prosecutor presented the evidence, the text messages, the search histories, the defense had no counter-arguments. Leo also testified. He described what he had found on the road. The tracks, the wheelchair, Sarah on the ledge. His testimony was clear, objective, irrefutable, and then came the most important testimony, a technical expert who reconstructed the entire scene. They showed that given the position of the wheelchair, the force required to push it, and the absence of brake marks, it was impossible for it to have been an accident. It had been deliberate, planned, executed in cold blood. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Ethan and Eleanor were found guilty of attempted murder. Ethan was sentenced. That of 15 years in prison. Eleanor, as the mastermind, got 18. When the sentence was read, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Justice had been served. It wouldn't bring back everything she had lost. It wouldn't erase the trauma. But it was closure. It was the end of a chapter. Leaving the courthouse, Sarah saw Leo waiting outside. He was holding Gabriel, rocking the baby who was crying softly. "Is it over?" Leo asked. "It's over." Leo put his arm around her, and the three of them stood there in silence, letting the moment sink in. In the following months, life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah started tutoring math students from home. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to help with expenses. Leo continued working as a courier, but cut back his hours to spend more time with Sarah and Gabriel. They created a routine. They woke up early, had breakfast together, took turns caring for Gabriel. Leo would make his deliveries in the morning and come back for lunch. In the afternoons, they would be together, playing with Gabriel, watching TV. At night, after putting the baby to sleep, they would talk about everything and nothing. And slowly, without either of them realizing it, their friendship transformed into something more. It happened on a rainy night. Gabriel was asleep. The house was quiet. Sarah and Leo were on the sofa, watching an old movie. And suddenly Sarah felt Leo's hand brush against hers. It was a light touch, almost accidental. But she didn't pull away. Leo looked at her. Sarah looked back. And in that silence, thick with meaning, they both understood. No words were needed. Leo leaned in slowly, giving Sarah time to pull back if she wanted to, but she didn't. She stayed there, waiting. And when their lips met, it was as if something clicked into place. As if everything that had happened before, all the suffering, all the pain, had a purpose. To bring them both to this moment. Together. They kissed slowly, unhurriedly, and when they parted, Sarah had tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be able to trust anyone again." "Me neither." "Do you want this?" Sarah asked, insecure. "I do." "Do you?" Sarah looked at Leo, really looked at him. She saw the man who had saved her, the man who had cared for her when she was broken. The man who had been a father to Gabriel when he didn't have to be, the man who had restored her faith in humanity. "I do." And so, on that rainy night in Kingston, something new began. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't without fear. But it was real, and it was theirs. The following months were a time of discovery. Sarah and Leo learned how to be a couple. They learned each other's quirks, tastes, and pet peeves. They fought a few times, always over silly things. But they always made up, always talked, always understood each other. Gabriel grew quickly. He was already crawling, drooling, smiling at everything. And he saw Leo as his father. He had been calling him Dada since he started talking. Leo never corrected him. He never said he wasn't the biological father, because in the end fatherhood wasn't about blood, it was about presence. It was about love. A year after Gabriel's birth, Sarah made a decision. She wanted to make it official. She wanted Gabriel to have Leo's last name. She wanted Leo to be legally recognized as his father. She spoke to a lawyer, explained the situation. The lawyer said it was possible, but they would need Ethan to relinquish his parental rights. Sarah didn't want any contact with him, but it was necessary. She wrote a letter. Short, direct. She explained that she wanted to remove Ethan from Gabriel's birth certificate, that she wanted Leo to take his place. She asked if he would agree. The reply came 3 weeks later. Ethan agreed. He said he didn't deserve to be called a father, that he had failed in every way, that Sarah and Gabriel deserved better. And so, with the relinquishment signed, Leo became Gabriel's father, legally, officially. When Sarah showed Leo the new birth certificate, he cried. He cried like he had never cried before, because it meant everything. It meant family. It meant belonging. It meant love. And that night, Leo held Gabriel in his arms and promised him that he would never, ever abandon him, that he would always be there, that he would be the father he deserved. Gabriel didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, and he smiled. 2 years had passed since that foggy afternoon on the mountain road, 2 years since Sarah had looked into the abyss and seen death up close. 2 years since Leo had appeared like a miracle in human form and changed everything. Life in Kingston was quiet. It wasn't the life Sarah had imagined for herself when she was younger, full of dreams and plans. But it was a good life. It was a real life, with ups and downs, with joys and challenges, but with love. So much love. Gabriel was 3 now, a smart, energetic boy who ran through the house all day and asked 1,000 questions a minute. He had Sarah's brown eyes and Leo's wide smile. He knew nothing about Ethan. He knew nothing about what had happened before he was born. And Sarah wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. When Gabriel was older, when he was ready, she would tell him. But not now. Not yet. Sarah had gone back to teaching at a public school. She didn't make much, but she loved her job. She loved seeing the kids' eyes light up when they understood a new concept. She loved making a difference in their lives, however small. Leo was still a courier, but now he had his own small business. He had hired 2 helpers and expanded his service. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable. They had enough to live well, to give Gabriel a happy childhood. And in 6 months, they would have another child. Sarah was pregnant again. A girl this time. They were going to name her Alice. When Sarah found out she was pregnant, she was scared. Very scared. The memories of her pregnancy with Gabriel were still fresh. The pain, the trauma, the feeling of vulnerability. But Leo was by her side, holding her hand, telling her that this time would be different. That this time she was safe. That this time everything would be okay, and it was. The pregnancy was smooth. No complications, no herniated disc, no drama. Sarah could walk, work, take care of Gabriel. She felt strong. She felt alive. One Sunday morning, Leo woke up early and made breakfast. Pancakes, fruit, orange juice. Gabriel was in the living room, watching cartoons. Sarah came down the stairs slowly, her large belly already getting in the way. "Good morning, love." Leo kissed her and helped her sit down. "Good morning. What's all this?" "I want to take you for a drive today, the 3 of us." "A drive? Where?" "It's a surprise." Sarah smiled. Leo loved surprises, little things that made her feel special, loved. After breakfast, they got Gabriel ready, put him in his car seat, and left. Leo drove calmly along the road that went up the mountain. Sarah looked out the window, watching the landscape change, the trees grow denser, the temperature drop. And then she realized. They were heading toward the town where it had all happened, toward the road. Sarah's heart sped up. She looked at Leo. "Leo, what are we doing?" He kept, his eyes on the road, but his voice was calm. "Do you trust me?" Sarah hesitated, but she nodded. Because she did. She trusted him with her life. They arrived at a scenic overlook Sarah didn't recognize. It was a beautiful spot, with a view of the valley, the mountains in the background, the sky blue and clear. There was no fog, no coldness, only light. Leo parked and they got out. Gabriel ran across the grass, laughing, chasing a butterfly. Sarah stood still, looking around. "It's near here, isn't it? The place where—" Leo nodded. "It is. About 2 miles from here. But I didn't want to take you there. I wanted to bring you here, to a different place, a beautiful place, because I want you to see that this road isn't just about pain. It's also about new beginnings. It's also about hope." Sarah felt her eyes well up with tears. Leo came closer and took her hands. "Sarah, when I found you in that ravine, I thought I was just saving a life. But I wasn't. I was finding my own life. You made me realize that I was just existing, not living. You gave me a purpose. You gave me a family. You gave me love." Sarah was crying now, unable to stop. Leo knelt. He took a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple, delicate ring. "Marry me, not because you need me, but because I need you. Because I want to spend the rest of my life by your side. Because I want to be your husband, the father of Gabriel and Alice. I want to build a life with you. A real life." Sarah couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Leo placed the ring on her finger and stood up. They kissed while Gabriel ran around them, laughing, not understanding the meaning of the moment, but feeling the joy. The wedding took place 3 months later, a simple ceremony in the backyard of their house. A few guests, Leo's sister, some friends, Detective Davis, who had become a friend to Sarah. Gabriel was the ring-bearer, so proud in his little blue suit. Sarah wore a simple white dress that accommodated her 6-month belly. When the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Leo kissed Sarah with all the tenderness in the world. And Sarah felt that finally, after everything, she had found her place, her home. Alice was born 3 months later, in the same hospital where Gabriel had been born, but this time there was no drama, no emergency. It was a calm, quick delivery. Alice came out crying loudly, healthy, perfect. When Leo held her for the first time, he felt the same thing he had felt with Gabriel, that absolute tenderness, that unconditional love. Gabriel met his sister the next day. He climbed onto the bed carefully, looked at the tiny little being and said, "Is that Alice?" "It is. Son." "She's so little." "She is, but she'll grow. And you're going to take care of her, right?" "I will." And he did. From a young age, Gabriel was a protective brother. He helped rock Alice when she cried. He fetched diapers for Sarah. He sang off-key songs to help his sister sleep. Life went on, simple, quiet, happy. But there was something Sarah needed to do, something she had been putting off for a long time. 5 years after the attempted murder, Sarah decided to visit Ethan in prison. Leo didn't understand. He asked why, what for. Ethan had tried to kill her. He didn't deserve a minute of her time, but Sarah explained that she had to. She needed to see with her own eyes what had become of him. She needed to truly close that chapter. Leo went with her. He stayed in the waiting room while Sarah went in. The visitation room was cold, impersonal. Ethan sat on the other side of the glass, wearing a prison uniform, his hair grey, his face aged. When he saw Sarah, his eyes filled with tears. "Sarah." "Ethan." They were silent for a moment. Then Ethan said, "I didn't expect you to come. I didn't think I would either, but I had to." "Why?" "Because I need to tell you something. I need to tell you that I forgive you." Ethan looked at her, incredulous. "How can you forgive me, after what I did?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Because carrying anger is too heavy. Because you're already paying for what you did. And because I need to move on without that weight. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me." Ethan lowered his head. "I regret it every single day. What I did. What I didn't do, for being so weak. I know, but regret doesn't change the past. Only we can change the future. How is Gabriel? He's good. He's happy. He has a sister now, and he has a father who truly loves him. Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were red. I'm glad. I really am. He deserves that. He does, and you deserve a chance to become a better person. I don't know if you'll succeed, but I hope you try. I'll try. Sarah stood up. Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Sarah, and thank you for coming. Sarah left the prison with a lighter heart. Leo was waiting for her outside. When he saw her, he asked, "How was it?" It was what it needed to be. And it was. Sarah had made peace with her past. It didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean the pain was gone. But it meant she was in control of her own story, that she could choose how to move forward. As for Eleanor, Sarah never visited her. She felt no need. Eleanor had never shown any remorse. She still believed she had done the right thing by trying to rid her son of a relationship she deemed unsuitable. There was nothing Sarah could say that would change that. So she left Eleanor in the past where she belonged. The following years were peaceful. Gabriel grew up, started school, made friends. Alice grew up too, a smart and talkative little girl. The family grew again when Sarah became pregnant for a third time, a boy whom they named Lucas. Leo expanded his business. He opened a small convenience store alongside his delivery service. He hired more employees. Life became more comfortable financially. Sarah continued to teach, but now she also wrote. She had started writing a book telling her story, not to make money, not to become famous, but to help other women going through similar situations, to show that it was possible to survive, that it was possible to rebuild, that it was possible to be happy again. The book was self-published. It didn't sell millions of copies, but it reached the right hands. Sarah received letters from women thanking her, saying her story had given them the strength to leave abusive relationships, to report them, to start over, and that for Sarah was worth more than any commercial success. One spring, afternoon 10 years after that foggy day, Sarah was in the backyard watching Gabriel, Alice and Lucas play. Leo was beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Have you ever thought about going back to that road?" Leo asked suddenly. Sarah looked at him. "The road where you found me?" "Yeah," Sarah thought for a moment. "I have. But I don't know if I need to. That place is part of my story, but it doesn't define who I am. This is who I am. This family, this life, this happiness." Leo smiled. "I think so too, but if you ever want to go, I'll go with you. I know. And that's why I love you." They stood there in silence, watching the children play, watching life happen. And Sarah thought about everything she had been through, the pain, the fear, the betrayal, the fall. But she also thought about the rescue, the healing, the love, the new beginning. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every tear, every scar, every moment of fear, because it had all led her here, to Leo, to Gabriel, Alice and Lucas, to this life she had built with her own hands on the rubble of what had been destroyed. And as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah closed her eyes and gave thanks. She was thankful she had survived, thankful she had screamed, thankful that Leo had listened, because in the end that's what had made all the difference. Someone had heard her cry for help, and had answered. 6 months later, Sarah was driving alone. It was rare for her to go out without the kids, but that day Leo had taken all 3 to visit his sister. Sarah had taken the opportunity to run some errands in downtown Kingston. On the way back, without planning it, without much thought, Sarah took the road that led toward the mountains. It wasn't her usual route. It was a detour, a different path, but she knew where it led. She drove slowly, calmly. The fog was beginning to roll in as it always did in the late afternoon. But it wasn't scary. It was just fog, part of the landscape, part of life in the mountains. Sarah passed the spot where she had first seen Leo, the beautiful overlook with its view of the valley. She stopped there for a few minutes, looking at the scenery, thinking about everything that had happened since. Then she kept driving. And then she saw it, the curve, the narrow road, the place where it had all happened. Sarah parked the car and got out. She walked to the edge of the road. She looked down. The ledge where she had fallen was still there. The rocks, the vegetation, all the same. But she was different. She was no longer the broken woman who had been pushed to her death. She was a survivor. She was a fighter. She was someone who had chosen to live, even when it would have been easier to give up. Sarah took a deep breath. The cold mountain air filled her lungs, and then, out loud, she said, "Thank you." She wasn't talking to anyone in particular. Maybe she was talking to God, maybe to the universe, maybe to herself. It didn't matter. "Thank you for letting me survive. Thank you for Leo showing up. Thank you for Gabriel, Alice, and Lucas. Thank you for this life I managed to build." And then she heard a familiar sound, a rough, lively engine, a motorcycle. Sarah turned, and she saw Leo getting off his bike, taking off his helmet, walking toward her with that smile that melted her heart. "How did you know I was here?" "I didn't. But when you didn't come back on time, I had a feeling. So I left the kids with my sister and came looking for you." Sarah smiled. "Always finding me." "Always." Leo hugged her. They stood there, in the middle of the road, holding each other, as the fog descended and the world grew quiet around them. "Are you okay?" Leo asked. "I am. More than okay. I just needed to come here, to see this place with new eyes and to realize I'm not afraid anymore." Leo kissed her forehead. "You never have to be afraid again. I'm here." "I know." They walked back to the car together. Leo loaded his bike onto the truck bed and got into the passenger seat. Sarah drove back home, along the road she now knew so well. It was no longer a place of fear. It was just a road, just a path. When they got home, the kids were already there. Gabriel, Alice, and Lucas ran to hug them, all talking at once. Sarah hugged all three, feeling their warmth, their love. And that night, when everyone was asleep, Sarah went to Gabriel's room. She looked at the son she had fought so hard to save. The son who had grown into a beautiful, smart, loving boy. The son who had a real father, not just by biology but by choice. She sat on the edge of his bed and stroked his hair. Gabriel stirred, but didn't wake, and Sarah whispered, "You were my miracle, Gabriel, and I will always protect you no matter what happens. You are safe, you are loved, and you always will be." Then she went to Alice and Lucas's room. She repeated the ritual, stroked their hair, whispered words of love, promised protection. When she finally went to her own room, Leo was already in bed, almost asleep. Sarah lay down beside him. Leo pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I love you, Sarah. I love you too, Leo." And so, holding each other, they slept, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day, full of challenges, of joys, of life. Because life, Sarah had learned, wasn't about avoiding the falls. It was about finding someone to help you get back up. It was about screaming when you needed help. It was about having the courage to start over, even when everything seemed lost. And Sarah had done all of that. She had screamed, she had been heard, she had gotten up, she had started over. And now she had a life, a real life, a life worth living. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Sarah and Leo has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of survival, resilience, and love, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this story resonated with you the most. Every day, we bring you intense stories like this one, stories that reveal the deepest parts of the human soul, that show that even in the darkest moments, there is always a light of hope. We'll see you in the next episode with a new story that will stir your emotions. Until then.